1. Let me start off by saying I am a 26-year-old female. I lived alone in a small house in a sort of rough city, being taken over by drug addicts. I have to chain everything I own to the house, or it gets stolen. In the past 2 years I have lived there, I have had countless encounters with interesting people. From someone jingling my front door handle to a drunk man banging on my door asking if he could come in to get away from the wolf running down the street in the middle of the city. I have had 2 brand new lawnmowers stolen, along with a grill, and I had to start having packages picked up from the post office. The house sits between a very busy road and a quiet alley that runs along the backyard. The backyard is completely fenced in. Now, this is a shotgun house. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, it's basically a long, skinny house with rooms straight through. When you walk in, you enter into the living room, then have to pass through the dining room, then the kitchen, to finally reach the bedroom. A little backstory. My boyfriend, who had been deployed for a year, came home, and we ended up breaking up on good terms. I had moved out and he had stayed. We had 3 German shepherds together, which normally wards off any creeps. He calls me up one day to ask a favor. He was going camping for the weekend and asked me to stay at his place to care for the dogs. I happily agreed. Some time alone with my pups was just the way I'd love to spend my weekend off from work. So, Friday finally rolls around, and at 6:30 a.m., he calls me to tell me he will be leaving a little early, around 9 a.m. that morning. I work 3rd shift, so I went back to sleep, figuring the dogs could hang out alone for a little while, so I can catch some sleep. Head over, feed and water them, walk them, and let them play in the yard before I left for work that night. A few hours go by. It's probably 11 a.m. by this point. The next door neighbor calls and says she hears the dogs going absolutely insane, barking and carrying on. That she has never heard them act that way before. She can hear it coming from the backyards. I immediately jump out of bed, get dressed, and hurry over to my ex's house, which takes about 20 minutes or so. I was assuming someone had stolen something from the yard, or was perhaps trying to get inside the house. I pull up and get out of my car. Everything is nice and quiet like normal, nothing out of the ordinary. I decide to take the time to walk the perimeter of the house, checking for broken windows, unlocked doors, etc. Anything out of the ordinary. I get to the backyard and notice a window in the bedroom open about halfway. Not much to be alarmed about, considering my ex was notorious for leaving them open from time to time. I decide it's time to go inside. As soon as I get the door open, the dogs growl and bark, so unlike them. They see that it's me and calm down a little bit. But something just feels off. They seem very stressed. Now, these are 3 very large German shepherds, extremely intelligent animals. The female, the oldest of the pack, gets behind me and starts to nudge me, pushing on the back of my legs and tugging my hand a little bit. She then would look at me and walk a few steps towards the back of the house, attempting to get me to follow. She kept doing this until I decided it was time to investigate that open window I found. Heading to the back, where the bedroom is, the dogs flank me, the 2 boys on both sides and the female leading the way. The door to the bedroom was broken, so there was a curtain hanging to separate it from the kitchen. She goes through, and I push the curtain aside. What I see is the most terrifying scene I have ever witnessed. Blood everywhere. The sheets are ripped off the bed, leaving the mattress exposed. The very large, very fresh blood stains soaking into the mattress. There is blood on the wall, on the bed, on the floor. Just everywhere, leaving my brain struggling to assess the situation. I can hear my heart beat in my ears, my body gets hot, adrenaline rushing through me. And I immediately freak out. I get down and start checking the dogs one by one, their entire bodies. Not a scratch. Not a drop of blood on the boys. I make it to Zara, the female. Blood on her snout. Not easily seen at first, her snout is all black. I assess her mouth. Blood did not come from this dog. It was not hers. and I see it. Bloody fingerprints on the window. The window is directly above the bed. Someone had tried to break in and she had saved the day. I immediately call the police and explain what happened. They show up in a matter of 5 minutes. Unfortunately, there is nothing they can do but take pictures and fingerprints. I never hear back, and the mystery guest was never found or caught. Nothing strange has happened to the yard or house since then. 2. The following story contains themes of sexual assault. I was just starting 3rd grade when I met him, David, along with his little gang of bullies. That's right, he was a fellow student. From day one, I was the target of his cruelty and his little rascal gang. Everything happened to me, from gum in my hair to being pushed on the playground. But the worst is what not even his little group knew about: the molestation. It all happened when he followed me into the bathroom and turned off the lights. He started touching my hair and started throwing both insults and compliments, calling my hair so soft and beautiful to stupid kaleidoscope head. My hair was always changing colors when I was younger. It still does, actually, so do my eyes. He then started to do it all over. I wanted to scream, but he was bigger than me, both in height and in size. Although I would later grow to be the tallest person in my class, which is one of the reasons it might have stopped, I think. Anyway, for the rest of the year, he continued the molestation, like making me touch him in his privates. While we were in therapy, I almost forgot to mention that I was in therapy for my learning disability, which was realized after 1st grade. My teacher, Mrs. O'Neill, was oblivious to the abuse, along with my actual teacher, Mrs. Honeydale. Bless those sweet teachers, though I don't blame them. I actually had Ms. Honeydale again in 6th grade, as a teacher, but only after I transferred from another. But that's a story for another time. Again, sorry, I'm kind of getting off topic. But anyway, the abuse lasted almost until the end of 3rd grade, when David, luckily, moved schools for apparently different reasons that I'm not 100% sure about. Although recently I've been going online to see if I can find people from my old elementary, middle and early high school years that I lost contact with. And unfortunately, his profile ended up crossing my path. His face is still the same, except he has a little facial hair. Everything else is still the same. Still has the same unemotional eyes, I remember. He is still the same old slightly chubby body with that same old stupid smile. I never hated another person in my life more than David. He's the reason my boyfriends can't touch me or do anything too intimate. I only dated 2 in high school who were truly sweet people, but my fear of being touched and defiled again was just too great. I'd like to point out that I'm 19 now and haven't had a boyfriend since my junior year of high school. Crying myself to sleep has been the only thing I could do, no matter how much I was called beautiful by my friends and family. Nothing helped. I've contemplated suicide in the past, when I was in middle school mainly, when my depression was really bad. But I'm happy to say now I've been able to pull myself together after I broke up with my last boyfriend in my junior year. I've been probably the happiest in a long time, and I'm continuing my path for happiness. I might even start a YouTube channel. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I want to get a little bit more of my life together. So, for the 3rd grade groper David, screw you, a-hole, and let's not meet. 3. Please be aware that the following contains themes of sexual assault. I had just started 9th grade a few months ago. It was the first day of school and I had a normal day. That is until I got to 7th period. I had gym, and since it was the first day we didn't do anything. Free to roam the gym along with the 2 other courses besides the one I was taking. I sat down in the bleachers and was like that for several minutes until a boy, Ben, came up and sat next to me and started talking to me. He asked me normal things at first, like what was my name, what grade I was in, etc. After roll call was done, I went over to my friends across the gym and he followed. This wasn't too unusual. I just assumed he had no friends in the class. Later, at the end of class, when we went to grab our stuff, he asked me for my number and I gave it to him. I also asked him to put his information in my phone, so he put his name and went to Google and got a picture of the Nazi symbol to put as his contact info. I thought it was strange, but I brushed it off and went to the buses. On the way down the hallway, he asked me to hold his hand. I said no at first, but then did it anyway because he asked again and I felt bad. So there we were, a 9th grade girl and a 10th grade boy holding hands, skipping down the hall while we sang the Wizard of Oz tune. We got to the buses, I said goodbye, and we both got on our designated buses. The next day it got weirder. I was with my friends in the cafeteria because we all got there early and that's where we just decided to be. Ben came in and saw us and sat down next to me and introduced himself as my friend, and my friends introduced themselves. He left early and we all talked amongst each other. We went to our first periods and then in second period, I sat at my group desk and waited for my friend to come. Ben walked in, explained he had failed the class last year and was retaking it so he could graduate. Skip a couple of hours and we're back in gym. Again, I'm sitting with Ben. I mostly let him talk, which might have been a mistake. He asked about my interests and said he could tell I was emo and liked bands and music. I nodded. He then asked if I liked anime. I said no, that I hated it actually. He then went on to say anime is great, and the kind he watched. He said that the reason he sat next to me the day before was because of what I was wearing. A black graphic tee, I don't remember what was on it. Jeans and black and white Converse. He explained that he would have dressed like this, but his mom forced him to wear something else. Polo shirts, khakis, and boat shoes. He looked like a grade A douchebag. I told him he should just sneak clothes out in his backpack and change at school. He said his mom burned all of his emo clothes, which made me feel really bad for him. He never mentioned his dad, but I never cared to ask. We talked about usual things like Five Nights at Freddy's and different anime. He changed the subject to explaining how he was a Nazi and that a dictatorship would work much better in the US. I asked about the situations that happened in World War II and the reasons the USA became its own country. He also said he was molested, which isn't really something you share the second day of meeting someone. School ended and we left. Skipped to next day and things got very weird. Ben said he wanted to play a game with me. The fire truck game, aka the rape game. I told him no, and he said, "Come on, you don't even know what it is." I said, "Fine, what is it?" And he placed his hand on my knee and started to move upwards and, "When you get uncomfortable, say red light." I immediately remembered seeing the game online and started hitting him, saying stop, and screaming fire trucks don't stop at red lights. We went across the way and he attempted to do it to a girl in one of my classes. She screamed right when he touched her knee. Then my friends introduced me to a girl, Pepper. She wasn't too weird at first, just a normal 11th grader. Well, all of my friends and I sat in a circle. There was about 7 of us together, including Pepper and Ben. We all talked about typical things girls talk about, with Ben just wanting to be included. Things went normal until Pepper grabbed my boobs and said, "I have very nice ones." I was a little uncomfortable and shrugged it off. The next day, we are all sitting in a circle again with Ben next to me, and he starts to run his hand up my leg because that day I was wearing short shorts. The rest was pretty uneventful. The next day before school started, I was sitting in the cafeteria, and my friends were saying that I need to tell Ben to go away because he was creeping them out. I told them I couldn't, didn't want to hurt his feelings, and they explained that while I was at the office, Ben and Pepper were taking turns holding them down while the other ran their hands up their legs. We came up with a plan to watch him and to report him, and I asked about Pepper, and they said they were going to excuse her because she's a girl. So we all spent about 2 weeks ignoring Ben and to a lesser extent Pepper. Then one day my class goes outside while the other 2 classes were in the self-defense room and the classroom. I was wearing a dress that day, and Ben asks me why I was wearing a dress, and if I was going on a date. I told him no, that I was just too lazy to put on pants that morning. Now, the dress doesn't exactly fit right because the way my body is, with a large chest and long torso. The dress was a little too short because of this, especially in the back, so I have to wear shorts underneath. Except this one time, which would be a TIFU story, but that's for another time. We go outside, and Ben finds some equipment used for practicing softball and baseball. He picks it up, and we start messing around with it. We then start talking to a boy who was by himself. They threw the baseball back and forth, and it goes by me. So I decide to pick it up. And he says, "Hey, you lied, you are wearing pants." He looked to see my shorts underneath while I was bending over. I was uncomfortable and could tell the boy we were with was too. So I decide it's time to ask my gym teacher if I can go to the nurse. I have a serious allergy to grass, so I need a Benadryl. I tell Ben this, and he says he'll do it, and runs to the teacher. He says okay, and Ben decides to assist me. I said I didn't need him, and he said nonsense, picked up my book bag, which had 4 textbooks, 3 binders, a 5-subject notebook, and a pencil pouch, so, mind you, it was heavy. I picked up my purse and we left. He was grunting and groaning before we got back to the school buildings and said, "Just give me my book bag." And he says he's trying to be a gentleman. 2 more feet, he drops it and says, "Okay, here." I pick it up with one hand and sling it onto my shoulder while he's insisting I carry it with 2. I say I'm fine, until I give up because I wanted him to stop asking. We get about 20 feet from one of the side entrances to the building, and he's pushing me into the shade again. I say I'm fine, until I give up and move into the shade. We go to the nurse, she gives me the allergy pill, and says she's going to move me out of PE because of my allergy. We hang out until the bell rings. I go to my club and Ben goes to the bus. He later gets moved out of the math class together, and I get moved out of the PE course. I now only see him in the hall, and there hasn't been any more cases of him sexually harassing my friends. As for Pepper, I only see her occasionally because of a mutual friend. Four. So when I was 10, me and my family were moving from my old apartment to a new one near the end of the town. And we were dropping some stuff off, and my mom told me to stay in the car, and that she'll be right back. So where we were parked was basically a 2-sided parking lot, and I was in the far left parking lot, not parked but in the middle, and I was in the passenger seat, looking at all the kids playing when I noticed in my right side, between 2 cars, there was a girl just standing there staring at me. And the thing that shook me and scared me was the fact that her face was terribly disformed. And when I was young, I was never introduced to that. And I was a really easily frightened kid. Like if I saw Chuck from Chuck E. Cheese walking out, I would start crying and hiding under a table. Yeah, I was that easily scared. So basically, when I ducked down from seeing that girl, I was freaking out, scared out of my mind. And when I looked back up, she was gone. And when I ducked down, it was less than 15 seconds. So I decided to ask these kids who were playing near if they saw the girl with the deformed face. They shrugged and said they didn't see anyone beside themselves. So I moved in quickly, made many friends in the neighborhood, and kept asking around if anyone ever saw or heard of a girl with a deformed face around. She looked roughly 12 to 13, so everyone just told me they never heard or saw anyone like that around. So to this day, I keep wondering to myself, was that a ghost I saw or an hallucination? I guess I'll never know. 5. First, I will say that psychic phenomena is normal with our family, so we're used to strange things happening. Now this happened roughly 6 or 7 years ago. Sorry, my memory on when is a bit foggy. My stepdad's father had just passed away, and my stepdad had to go to the funeral and will reading. Both he and my mother took time off work to go, while me and my older sister stayed home, since we each had our own jobs. Now, I have never met my stepdad's father, and the only time I have ever visited his family was when we met his stepdad and mother in a different state than his father's, so I have not been to his real father's place. Nor have I seen any pictures of the place either. So now that the background is out of the way, on to the rest of the story. So after the will reading, my stepfather had gotten his father's ring, which he had been wearing, and at some point, he did not realize the ring had come off. The entire family spent the rest of the day looking for it when my phone rings. The call is my mother, and the first thing she says is, "We need some help." I asked what was wrong, and she told me about the ring, that he had lost it at some point that day, and they could not find it. Now I am down south while they are up north, about a 2-day drive. I told her to give me about half an hour and I would call her back. So I went about the day while the ring sat in my mind. After a while I could see the ring and exactly where it was sitting, and that he had been doing yard work when it was lost, which she had not told me. So I called her back and asked her to go to the back door of the house. Once she was there, I said, "Look straight ahead and slightly to the left, and you should see a large pile of leaves." I told her it should be about 10 feet from a shed of some sort, which she said she could see it. I said, "Go over to the pile, and the ring is laying on its edge, facing away from the shed." So she says she will go and check. So my mom goes and tells the family, but now it's getting dark out, so they do not find it that night. The next morning, his sister is drinking coffee while looking at the pile of leaves from the front door of the kitchen, when she decided to go look again. So she proceeds to the pile and goes to the side facing away from the shed, and uses her foot to shift some of the leaves, and there on the ground was the ring. Edit. A bit more information about the story. It happened in 2007, and I also asked my mother about what happened on their end. She told no one where I said the ring was, so it could not have been planted at that spot. Though we both feel that someone found the ring and wanted to keep it, but when they realized how much it was being looked for, they threw it out into the yard when everyone was asleep. He lost the ring because he had been wearing it and it was too big. My mother also told me that she had a dream that the ring would be found that day, but could not tell who found it. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Scary Subscriber Stories, episode 27. I'm recording this on Boxing Day, and while I do not and have never drunk, I'm feeling kinda today. Got a bit of a headache, bit of a dry throat, which is generally a sign that I've had too much of a good time the previous day. Totally worth it though. Okay, I'm not going to drag this outro on too much, just to let you guys know that you can expect the usual uploads this week, and I hope you're all having a very relaxing time of it during this holiday season. And if you unfortunately have to work, then I hope it goes speedily for you. And with that, I think I'm going to head off, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.